worried that you might be the cool kid? You wear the latest fashions on top of all the trends. Or have you ever worried you were too much in the mainstream? Always so generic, more normal than your friends. Well, we've devised a test to put to rest your fears. There's no need to panic if you lend us your ears. Tonight you can sleep easy after all that you've heard. Cause if you like the show, then you're probably a nerd. Oh, Canon, it's Canon, it's all. Tyler, Phil, and Boris. Oh, Canon, it's Canon, it's all in Canon.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the It's Canon podcast. It's Sunday. You know what that means. It's time for Geek News of the Week. We are your hosts. I'm Boris, and this week I'm joined by Phil.
Hey. God damn it. What was that? Are you? Oh, God.
Bad Albert.
Albert.
And
Yeah, that's what it was. I was like, what?
Tyler.
Because of certain news this week that I imagine we might go over briefly, from now on, I need to be called award-winning Tyler.
Oh my God, I love it. That's right. It is the It's Canon podcast, a podcast where we talk about all things geek. We talk about everything in movies, everything in video games, everything in comics, everything on TV, everything in the land of Star Wars, everything in Lego, everything books, anything and everything. And the best part of it all is that it's all in canon. All right, guys, another week. We have a fun week this week. We've been super focused the past few weeks on like 4, 5, 6 episodes a week. This week, simply because of timing, simply because a lot of focus has been put onto PlayStation 5 and Xbox One, we're only going to have one episode of the news. We'll have which is today, Sunday. Tomorrow on Monday, we are going to have our Mando Monday as we review and analyze Season 2, Episode 3, Chapter 11, with a listener of the It's Canon podcast, Andy. And then no episode on Wednesday, so this week we are merging our news and featured episode. And then on Thursday, it is NXT Talk with myself and Matt, as we chat about all things NXT. So that's what the schedule looks like this week. It's going to be as we go into the holiday season for our American listeners, I think next week we will be back to the full spectrum of episodes, but we'll see what happens this week. Phil, how is everything going?
It's going great. I know this might be off of our radar a little bit, but it just kind of popped into my head. When you mentioned about all things Lego, there was a little bit of Lego news this week. So, yeah,
Ooh.
I wouldn't mind talking about that at some point.
All right.
So,
All right, cool. What are you watching? What's going on in the world of Phil?
it's actually, you know what, content-wise, it's pretty quiet other than The Mandalorian, as we talked about. I got to catch up on Brave New World. And other than that, I kind of found out that they cut off my HBO after all. So I'm gonna have to figure that end of things out. But I've been watching you know what's funny? It's not really geeky though. You guys might appreciate this, you might not. Ewan McGregor used to do a show, Long Way Round, where he'd get on a motorbike and go around the world with his friend Charlie Boorman. And then they did a follow-up show called Long Way Down. And it was him and Charlie going from London to South Africa on their motorbikes. Now, Apple TV Plus has acquired the rights for those shows. So, number one, it's broadcasting them. But number two, they funded and made a new show called Long Way Up, which is Ewan and Charlie going from Argentina to Los Angeles. But here's the catch. It's all using electric motorcycles and it's all using the Revan concept vehicles for support vehicles, electric pickup trucks.
Very
Oh,
interesting.
neat.
So it's really interesting seeing them trying to traverse the different countries, the different power grids, the different challenges with the weather, with the coldness, with the battery response. And these guys have no freaking clue what they're doing. Harley Davidson made them some custom bikes, some custom electric bikes that they a touring bike. And man, oh man, I just eat that stuff up. I really do. It is a lot of fun. So I give that 2 thumbs up in the non-geek world, but it's good to see Ewan's getting ready for Obi-Wan.
Yep.
I think that counts as geek world personally.
Yeah. It's motorcycle geek.
Yeah, they're a type of geek. We let them into the family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Tyler, how
I
about
just
you?
love
What
the
have you been
narrative.
watching? What's new? What's going on in the world of Tyler? Any more white supremacist stories? Any more? What's going on?
Oh, I have 3 pieces of good news about the store. Which is where all my news is this week's from the store. Number 1 is, yeah, the white supremacists came back, and based upon some of the recent politics and what's happening in the United States, they're a little bit sour grapes.
Womp womp womp.
So, yeah, right. So it's like, oh my fan, that's too bad that this has happened to you.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling good about that. And then the other good piece of news is, as of last night, my store, the one I run and manage and like am doing a ton for, we won number 3 for the best hobby and collectible store in Milton.
Yeah.
Without knowing we were in the running. They never actually told us, so I never advertised and still got 3rd. And number 2 is I got 3rd in the Greater Toronto area.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Very
I
nice.
beat Silver Snail. I beat every board game store.
Wow.
I was beaten by Mastermind Games.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a store I have never heard of.
Right. There you go. Congrats, man.
So
very good news. Very good news.
Feels good.
Very good
Yeah.
news. And you were also able to get your hands on a PlayStation 5.
Yeah. I mean, Boris and Phil know the weird story that happened of I briefly had 2 by accident. When I got a call from my local EB Games after ordering one online, and the local EB Games was like, yeah, we have one for you. And I'm like, but you said you didn't before. You said you didn't have enough. And they were like, that is what we said. Are you coming tomorrow to pick it up or no?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's been very weird. The rollout has been very, very weird and like ominous. Like I don't know if anyone really knows what's going on. I feel like just, EB stores might have 5, they might have 500. EB stores, Amazon, as soon as an order is canceled, it'll come back up. And if you're lucky enough to be online, you scoop it up and everything is good and kosher. But it's just been a very awkward rollout. We'll talk a little bit more about it as we talk about, our experiences with the PlayStation 5. Yeah, it's just there's a lot is going on, and I'm not too sure about it. Phil, I know that you made one big purchase at least last night, so congrats on that one. You bought yourself a new mic.
I got. Tyler was trying to orchestrate the second PS5 to me, and it ultimately didn't materialize, which is fine. I appreciate all of Tyler's efforts on that. But I decided, you know what? I'm going to just take the pressure off myself because I can buy the games online or in the store anyway for the PS4 in most cases. Like, darn, I'm not going to be able to play the Demon Souls, the Dark Souls, like, pre-game, which I never touch with a 10-foot pole anyway. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to buy a nice new mic, and that's being shipped to me. So it should be here by next episode, I'm hoping.
Very cool.
Ooh. An even butterier Phil voice.
Yeah, I don't know, actually. I was watching some comparisons, and it's different from right now. I'm using a Blue Yeti, which seems to sound pretty good. This is a little more mid-range active, which I think will benefit, but only testing and software configuration will tell. So I'm gonna be able to get a little bit sweaty on some of that stuff. So I'm excited about that. And it's got
Ooh.
capacitive touches on it.
Very cool.
Ooh.
Very cool.
Ooh.
Yeah, very cool.
Ah.
Yeah, Mike geek stuff. Like
Yep.
this is deep in the hole.
Oh,
Look,
Oh.
some people are here for that.
Oh,
I mean, I
believe me,
remember.
I looked on YouTube last night and I was shocked.
oh, it's crazy, man. It's
Yeah,
honestly
well,
crazy.
I don't know if we still have it now, but we used to have so many people ask, like, "What do you use for your setup?" And Boris would be like, "I hate you."
Oh, I get asked all the time because
Yeah,
one thing that, you know,
it's a thing.
so these are the compliments that we get on the show. It has nothing to do with the actual content of the show. It's always, hey, we love
No
your
one cares.
theme. It's like, of course you do. Kevin O'Leary made it. The real Kevin O'Leary, not the guy who crashes boats.
Yeah.
So that's the number one feedback I always get. It's like, kudos on the theme. It's like, cool. I had nothing to do with it. Even though that's like a bit of a lie, but one day we're gonna have Kevin on to actually talk about, you know, what he does and how he made this theme. But that's beside the point. The second compliment we get is, hey, for a podcast, you guys sound pretty good. How do you do it? And it's really hard to describe, especially now that I don't use a physical mixer. I used to. 5 years ago, Kyle, Tyler, and myself used to sit in the, my apartment, and we used to all record together, and I would, doing the mixing and the hosting and the new stuff, and the setup was just insane. Now that I think back about it, but it worked really well, and we had really good sounding podcasts over time. But now I use a digital mixer, and it has its pros and its cons, and overall, like, I'm satisfied. At some point, we will have to get to physical mixing again, but like right now, I'm happy. The episodes sound good. We do minimal editing if humanly possible, so everything is good. And then the third thing that we always get, and I guess this is towards more the content, but it's, you guys are hilarious, you guys are real, blah, blah, blah. One thing that does come up, and this is like the perfect segue into our first and most, I'm not going to say important, but it's something that I want to highlight, news item, and that is, people always ask, how much prep do we do? Because, apparently sometimes we actually do sound like we know what we're doing. And one thing that I always say is that, I try to keep it very lax. Like, we have a messenger thread where we send each other stuff throughout the week. And I mainly send them links so that I know where to look when I actually need them. I have a Google Docs page where I keep all the links. And sometimes I just don't have the time to open that up. So I put it in our messenger thread, and, we have a quick discussion about it. One thing that I try to do is I try to minimize chat about specific things. For example, number one rule is between Friday and Sunday, we do not talk about Mandalorian outside of saying holy shit or what the fuck. We tend to, everyone sends links. So I have links from Phil, I have links from Tyler, and we kind of try to create somewhat of a format. I know that sometimes I jump back and forth a lot, but as we're recording, I'm still kind of browsing and seeing if there's any breaking news. Typically, there's not when we record our news episode on Sunday, which is typically when we record our news episode. But for example, last Monday, the entire agenda that I had got thrown to the garbage because the Square Enix news trumped everything that we were going to talk about. So, it's a lot of back and forth, and it really is actually a lot more prep that we do for this show than I think about. But a lot of it, I just don't think about because it's stuff that I would do regardless of whether I was hosting a show or being on a podcast or whatever. Do you guys agree with my assessment so far?
I agree with everything you're saying.
All right.
Yep.
That silence
I know that,
really scared me for a second.
Well, I said...
You know what? Like, having the Mandalorian show for myself just really made me look at the prep in a different way. You know, I know I've done a couple of news episodes and whatnot, but really, you're kind of scouring the news and capturing the reaction. So
Mhm.
you can't script it or anything like that. But with the Mandalorian episodes, I have to, you know, watch the show, enjoy it as a fan, and then the subsequent day, I start doing my research and my deeper dives, which isn't work for me. I do try to. My notes are insane for those shows. Like, just so everybody knows, a lot of the time, depending on the guest and the discussion that we have, it can be like herding cats. Like, it's organic, but some of the stuff that I make notes on or that I think is extremely important gets cast aside just because we chase down real reaction
Yep.
and whatnot.
Mhm.
So I find that that's always a surprise. And you know, like this week again, you know, Andy did a great job in bringing ideas to the table, as did Carl. And but you know, like when it came to last week's guest and whatnot, it got sweaty.
Yeah,
So it's hard to predict.
it really is.
That's all I can say.
It really is.
Mhm.
And, to the point, I guess short story long is, how do we choose what actually gets put on the news? Being in the geek world, there's million and one websites. There's infinity plus one websites in regards to, geek news and this and that. And most of the time, a lot of the places report on the same thing. But, one kind of general, not I don't want to say rule, but guideline I'd like to have with Phil and Tyler is, let's try to validate what we're gonna say. In regards to sources, in regards to like the level of I guess truth it is.
Mhm.
I never wanted, and going back to 2015 when it was Kyle, Tyler, and myself, to now that it's Phil, Tyler, and myself. Um, I don't want to report on hearsay and gossip.
Hmm.
So sometimes I will leave out a news item for until the following week so that, we can do some kind of verification in our own way. Um, so I try not to add rumors, innuendo, speculation into this, and sometimes it's really difficult when you're dealing with video games, when you're dealing with Star Wars. We
Mhm.
can make a whole episode about fake Star Wars news. When we had Matt Elfring on, even he was saying, like, to him it's just
Yeah.
really funny how many times a fan site can report on something. So and so is actually so and so's father. And then
Mhm.
other sites will pick up on that, and then at some point there's so many bullshit sites reporting this that a mainstream site is going to pick it up and run with it. And I think a good example of that is a discussion that we're going to have on Monday in regards to, the cancel culture and Baby Yoda trying to be canceled.
Mhm.
So it's hard for us sometimes, but other times it's, I just completely avoid things at first sight. So yesterday I was perusing through the internet trying to plan out what our news episode was going to look like, and there was a few articles that really, caught my eye. And it dealt with the most stressful video games based on average heart rate, beats per minute. So obviously, the first site that I saw, had 10 games, and it gave you what the average heart rate was. And then I started noticing other sites were reporting on the same quote unquote study. And I'm using study very, very loosely right now. And the irony here is that they had a different list from the first site. Then I go to
But the same
my
source.
same source, third link, same bullshit study being referenced, but they had a different list from the first two. So I noticed this trend, and I kept every link I clicked, it had a different list. Same study was being sourced. It was the same, basic story, but the actual list on the games would change from site to site to cite. And this is one of those things where it's just, for me, it's just absolute irresponsible reporting that just gets blown way up and out of proportion. And then at this point, it's like, who do you believe? So here's the thing. The fact that there's just so much wrong with here, it's really hard for me to break this down. All right, let's start with the fact that this quote-unquote study that took place. So it's mind-boggling. So number one, when it comes to gamers, I think it's very difficult to quantify and kind of have a good baseline in regards to something like heart rate with gamers. How do you baseline this? So, there was no additional information on how they picked their test subjects, who these test subjects were, where they lived, what system was their favorite. There was a lot of questions that I had when I read the first article. But then when you're actually reading this quote unquote study was based on 14 gamers.
Which, for anyone who knows stats, that's too small. You cannot deduce anything from that number.
Yep.
You can deduce people played games.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it was, this experiment included a sample of 14 gamers whose heart rates were measured using heart rate monitors while playing a selection of games for at least 15 hours per week at a maximum of 30 minutes each.
Like what? Fitbit heart rate monitors?
That's the thing.
Well, I mean, that's another question.
That's another question that I had. But, Tyler, what's your take on this?
Oh, I mean, yeah, we had I need to share the funny story for when Boris first shared this in the chat. I had a very long week. Like, I was just tired by the end of the week, and nothing special. But my brain was unable to parse why Boris would share this. And Boris was like, this is what we're covering. And I was like, is this where I quit? Are we actually covering this story? Do I have to fight Boris now? Because I was and it was me just being too tired. And I was like, I had to send Boris, like, what are you talking about? What's the story we're covering? And he had to tell me that, like, this is bullshit. And at the end of the day, it is. And I do some journalism work other than this. And I have turned down gigs because I think this is just flat out irresponsible. And we see it all over the place of, like, a thing becomes a story with one gaming website, and then 12 others will do the same story because it's being done elsewhere. And it's not even news. It's not a story until enough people say it is.
Yep.
It's clickbait. Like,
100%.
honestly, like it's sensational in approach. It's lacking in any type of diligence.
Agreed.
And it's there to be, like, I even logged into Facebook, all right, people? I don't like going into Facebook. I logged into Facebook and I saw this bullshit all over the place. Like, and I'm like, oh, man, like, I understand what Boris was going for now. Because this is, it's tripe. Like, Mario Kart is the #1 most stressful game in the universe.
Yeah.
I'm like, Mario Kart? Oh, man, that's like the most fun game there is. Like, what is happening in people's homes? And then, it's 14 people's homes. Okay.
I mean, not in their homes, in a lab environment, maybe. Who knows?
Maybe. Oh, yeah. But it's like, all right, you're going to play Mario Kart or we're cutting your pinky finger off. Like, all right, my heart rate. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
like, I was just like, Mario Kart's like fun. It's not stressful. And immediately Tyler and I were like, well, we hate all but like 2 of these games.
Well, that also happened.
Yeah.
Like, ugh, it was dirty.
See, and one thing I always tell these guys is, there is a method to my madness. Like, there always is a reason why I send you guys something. And it's funny because I sent it without context, knowing I was going to get blowback from the 2 of you. Here's the thing.
You know what? Like, I would have just eviscerated it online. Like, if you didn't want to discuss it, I would have been okay with it. And then I'm going to go poo-poo on it when we talk about it.
Yeah. Yep. And,
Like,
and this is the thing. Like, if you do a Google search for most stressful games, you'll find all these articles. We're not going to go through any list because that we're not reporting on this.
That's not the point.
Yeah, the point right now that we're trying to make is that this is just absolute irresponsible journalism. But the issue that I have is that a legitimate website at that point might actually pick this up and, put it into the quote-unquote mainstream. So if you Google most stressful games and you click on the news articles, you'll see the websites. And you really have to, number one, question where these websites are coming from. The fact that every link refers to a study, but no one actually knows where this study was done is hilarious.
Yep.
You can't find more information on this study. So for those of you who don't, peruse through, studies and medical journals and things like that, you have to have various sources, and there's articles just on the study and how this study was conducted. You can't find any of that information anywhere. The fact that the lists are different for every single article is the fact that just gets to me.
Yeah.
And none of these websites surprise me that they picked up on this. I'm not going to name any of them, but I'm not shocked at who's reporting on this story. I'm just more scared, and this is like putting this out of the geek world. This is how shit gets started.
Like, I'm just gonna say this. Is this like that, like somebody trying to start a video games are evil type discussion?
Oh, I don't
Like
think so.
I
trying
don't
to
think so.
inadvertently fuel
But
well, look at the heart rates of the children kind of
But
reaction,
that's
right?
the
Where
thing.
it's like
No, you
I'm gonna
hit the
let
nail
my
on the
kid
head.
play
While-
Mario Kart tonight.
Well,
No,
that's
his
the
heart
thing,
will
Phil.
explode.
That's the thing, Phil. While this isn't directly saying that, if I was a journalist, trying to make a controversial piece about video games, I would for sure begin referencing all of this and say, look, this isn't good for you. It's not healthy for you. If this is what your heart rate looks like after, 30 minutes of playing a video game, what's the long-term damage,
As well, I'm going to put it out there, and I know we try to avoid this. I'm not going to directly finger point it, but is it not a result of kind of our anti-news cycles that have been pressed upon us through society, like, and just looking at the United States and maybe a lot of the Trump stuff that's going on, where it's a denial of a lot of stuff, where it's like, well, no, I do have the truth. There's a study. You can look it up. And, people are asking, where's the study? What are you talking about? Like, well, you could just look it up. And this kind of reeks of that to me.
Here's the thing. I feel like that's part of it. Here's kind of where this vicious cycle comes into play. Right now, we are led to believe that mainstream media is nothing but bullshit. So we rely on other sources. Now, these other sources might be Boris, Phil, and Tyler's website, who, we're making bullshit up as we go along, right? So then people are going to start reading that and taking that as the Bible. And the problem with that is that at that point, we're just creating bullshit. It's this vicious cycle of, I don't believe the mainstream media. I'm going to try to find other places that have good information. But what I find that happens is that you're going to gravitate towards a website that agrees with my thoughts. It's something that I always say is, just because you don't agree with something on the news doesn't make it fake news. So this is why these websites are gaining so much momentum. Sorry, go ahead.
Angry Phil moment here. This is a pet peeve of mine, in the fact that opinion pieces are interpreted as factual. And people need to be able to separate the two. We can come on here and say our opinion. That sucks ass. Blah, blah, blah. This is the reasons why. But that's not news. News is like factual observations based in fact. An opinion piece is me interpreting that fact and spinning it out.
No.
No?
No, you're slightly off. There are three kinds of pieces. There's opinion, analysis, and news.
Okay, fair enough.
And there is some interaction between them. So an opinion is when you say, like, let's say we look at this article, heart rates go up, and you say, the analysis is heart rates go up, and the analysis is, well, it looks like these might be stressful. It looks like there might be some other factors going on here. Let's continue to watch this. Further studies are probably needed. Opinion is you going that, like, oh, this study says this. The analysis means that you're probably getting stressed. And now my opinion is kill all gamers.
Right. But that's my point, is like that opinion piece is getting presented as the news.
Oh, 100%.
In these alternate kind of realities, right?
Well,
Like
that's the
on
issue
these
right there.
websites that have no accountability.
Editorials does not equal news. Editorial equals opinion on something that's happening.
Yeah, it can be informed by analysis. It can have components, but it just bothers me, and that's a lot of the time when I see the memes on Facebook, on Twitter, and things like that. They're based off of, they're trying to factualize an opinion in like an editorial. Like, you can go consume that. You can agree with it or disagree with it all you want. That's healthy. But I just hate the idea that it's shrouded out there as news, and then somebody goes, well, it's a fact, right? Like, this happened because some website wrote it. And I'm like, no, it just means somebody had an interest in something, and they had the means to publish it and come across to your eyeballs, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's just a symptom of the internet.
Yeah.
Like, people can produce and publish whatever they want.
Yep.
And we're giving them 140 characters at a time means to do it, right? Or a podcast mic, or whatever. There's a lot of self-expression, and we choose to do it in a creative way, an informed way. We have opinions on it. You can agree or disagree with them.
Yeah.
But
that's why
really,
I tried,
people,
what I tried very hard to do is, read out, give you the headline, give you some backstory, and then make that clear distinction, that wall, that, okay, news item is done, now here's our opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we stay away. You brought up the Star Wars stuff. I stay away from a lot of that stuff. Like, I'll speculate openly about the Boba Fett show, but because it's sourced by Hollywood sources, like we have, like, there's different levels that happen in accountability world, right? There's the guy that can make the video and just make any claim he wants. I really want this to happen in Star Wars. I hope Dave Filoni makes a Boba Fett show. And then there's, the Hollywood trades are actually being invited in and told that there's stuff in production, right? Now I'm like, okay, we can kind of talk about this because it's being legitimately qualified and talked about beyond, I hope this happens.
Yeah. And that's part of the issue, is that, as the number of these, smaller websites, for lack of a better term, these opinion websites, as the more they all have the same story, someone can easily come in and say, oh, the mainstream media is ignoring this. That means that the mainstream media is fake news because, they don't want to report on the truth, So it's a vicious cycle that's going on. And it's just so, for me, it's so interesting to see how, in our little segment of the geek world, this happens. Now, put ourselves into the mainstream news cycles, no wonder there's this battle and war against mainstream media. Now, I'm not saying that the mainstream media is perfect. I'm not trying to say that. I'm also not saying the mainstream media is the end-all, be-all Bible. What I'm trying to say is, watch out, check sources, inform your own opinion, do your own research that doesn't include Facebook and YouTube. The truth is always somewhere in the middle, or in this case, when you find out that, look, the same website is citing a research thing that happened that may or may not have happened, but you can't find any actual information on it. The list that's being generated is different for everyone. That's when you really have to start questioning this stuff.
Yep, I agree. Like, I turn on the news and watch the news, and I know I didn't cut the cord, and I know a lot of people who have, and I think that leads to a lot of the confusion that's out there, because news becomes something that you get off of the media you're watching, whether it be YouTube, whether it be Facebook, whatever, and people can't separate that opinion piece. But what can you do?
I wish that it was that simple, because I do think that it's worth remembering that, like, the big granddaddy that made this all happen was Fox News.
Yeah.
right? They're the ones that pioneered it. And very recently, there was a legal case that said no sane person would consider Tucker Carlson to be news.
Yeah.
And that is what the court found.
Yeah.
And yet.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, and I guess the counter argument to that is everything else is leftist or whatever, like from their point of view, which is whether or not I agree with it, it's a point of view.
Exactly. That's exactly. It's a point of view. It's an opinion. And so, we've talked, and that's how essentially, we decide on what ends up on the show. There's a lot more to it. We kind of take a look at sources, and again, sometimes I might wait a week or two to talk about it because I want to do a little more research on it. Sometimes we're going to wait on it because it's going to become a featured episode, or sometimes it's, we'll talk about it, but also want to do a featured episode on it. Netflix, I'm looking at you. So, it just overall varies. Now, when we're talking about mainstream media and history, we always have to also consider, revisionist history and 2020, the 2020 vision on a certain situation. And I think that right now, over the past week or so in the geek world, there's been some revisionist history happening with George Lucas.
Oh my God.
Yep. What a perfect segue, huh?
Yep.
And, right now, it's hilarious because from about 1997 to 2005, George Lucas was the evil emperor of the Star Wars world. Everyone hated him because he ruined the franchise with the prequel trilogy. The only thing that would have, gotten him on Star Wars fans' good books was if he sold his property to an even bigger evil empire, and he did just that. He sold it to the evil empire of Disney. So somehow, overnight, George Lucas went from the enemy to the savior, to the martyr, not the savior, the martyr of the Star Wars franchise. And I know that there's a lot of rumor and innuendo that he got screwed, and during development of the sequel trilogy. But, over the past year or so, since the fallout of
Rise of
Skywalker, George has talked about, or they've come back and looked at old articles and interviews that he's had. And, there seems to be this revisionist history happening with George Lucas and his impact and his plans in regards to Star Wars. Phil, do you want to take over and kind of highlight some of those things that that George Lucas apparently had planned, and then Tyler and I are going to poo-poo all over that?
I'm gonna do a fact check right now.
Oh yeah.
In that this all came from a book. The reason why this controversy started was because it came from a book called The Star Wars Archives. This is the second book of the archives, dealing with, I believe, the prequel trilogy timeline. And the author interviewed George Lucas, and George brought up these statements in that interview. All right. And this is a book. I've been looking at buying it. It's about $260.
Damn.
All right. This is a damn big book. I've wanted both, but
Darn big.
so yeah. So I don't know that really it affects my view of it a little bit, because I think it's more like George Lucas has a whole bunch of thoughts that run through his head, and he spills them out sometimes, and they are legitimate thoughts. Like, wouldn't it be neat if R2-D2 had like a plastic head and could vacuum as well and be a trash can? That's a valid thought. And George could give an interview and say, well, the original impetus for R2-D2 was to be a trash can and a personal vibration unit. And like, that's legitimate. All right.
These are human thoughts.
These are human thoughts that a creative guy had.
And I can attest to this. I can agree, because I don't know if you guys ever saw these, but when Star Wars finally came back into the limelight, into mainstream was in the mid '90s when they released the original trilogy on VHS for the first time, and it was finally remastered, yada 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 yada. And they had these interviews with George Lucas at the beginning of the tapes, and some of the shit that he was saying was just so far fetched. They were so crazy. But the reason why some of these do stand out is because he was talking about, what if I did that, what if we found out how Darth Vader became Darth Vader? Things like that. Anyways, but I do remember even as a child, because I've never rewatched them. I only watched them as they came out, and I was about, I want to say 11 years old, 10, 11 years old when I watched this stuff. But I just remember hearing some of this stuff and thinking that this guy is batshit crazy.
Yeah, and that's always been something that George has dealt with, right? Like, you can go back and look at the original transcripts and the wills and all that stuff. George has been on some trippy moves with Star Wars, and then it refined down. He's always been heady about the idea. I grew up with the whole idea, oh, I wrote 9 movies, and they're all going to be great, and blah, blah, blah. And it all seems to be a lot of bullcrap, right? Where it just comes back down to money time. The impetus to do such things. And I read these comments. I'm not even going to get into them too specifically because it's just more musings by a guy who's very creative, and he can make it whatever it is. Now, he did submit, I read the Bob Iger book. He did submit a story arc for the 3 sequel films. There was no commitment, and Bob is very adamant about this. There was no commitment that they were going to adhere to it. There was absolutely, they paid him $4 billion and said, thank you for Star Wars. We would like to consult you. And he tried to write the stuff, and he basically got told, no, we're going in a different direction. And he's like, well, no, I don't like the direction you're going to. And now he's living vicariously through this new CEO, apparently, but that's a rumor. All right. So I don't know what kind of ink or what kind of blood is on any future Star Wars product, but there are occasionally set pictures of George on The Mandalorian holding the child, hanging out with Jon Favreau, hanging out with Dave Filoni. Dave Filoni is his prodigal son. Like, Dave is the guy who learned under George about story beats, about everything that is pure and magic about Star Wars from the creator himself, and distilled of a lot of these little, I don't know, like facts that a lot of fans really circle in on and try to build a story around. And I don't think there's any story other than George might have been dropping a deuce one day and thought about the idea that the sequel trilogies would be really cool if they did this.
Mm-hmm.
And then he pitched it out with the toilet paper. And he went on to something else. Like, that's a creative guy. He's a freaking genius. Whether you love it or hate it, Jar Jar Binks or whatever controversy you want to do, Star Wars has always been like that. And it's always been something that's situational. He didn't go in there thinking Leia's going to be Luke's brother. The only reason why he chose to put that in is because he needed a reason for Darth Vader to freak out in the fight in Return of the Jedi.
Yep.
He needed motivation. It served the story and the characters. And, Mark Hamill's like, well, what do you mean Carrie Fisher's my sister? Mm-hmm. And then now we've got prequels and everything like that. People have to calm their shit when it comes to this. That's like Star Wars fans. Step back. Enjoy the fact that it exists. If you don't like it, don't worry. There's going to be more to come. It's like Fearless Fred says it all the time. Star Wars is like pizza. Even when it's bad, it's good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, go buy the $200 book. Don't read it. Just look at the pictures. I'm impressed somebody read it.
Yeah.
To be honest, no offense to the author, but it's preserved in history. It's one of his musings. And I think that's, that's where I look at stuff like this. I don't get all wrapped up and sweaty in it because it doesn't change anything.
Exactly. The issue now is going back to the original thing that we were talking about, and that's, how these smaller stories can build into something bigger is now we're seeing in the mainstream geek media. You know, these are George Lucas's confirmed plans for the sequel trilogy, you know, from Darth Maul being the big bad to God knows what else was going on. And now
Yeah.
people are just absolutely shitting on Disney even more, saying, "Why didn't you do this? Why did you decide to cut Lucas out? Why this? Why that?" And this is that revisionist history, where now George Lucas is like now even more so seen as a martyr, you know, throughout the Star Wars
Like,
timeline.
come on. Dave Filoni killed Darth Maul in Rebels.
Yeah.
All right. Go watch the end of season 3. I think it's the second last episode. It's done. Like
Mhm.
like Disney, to their credit, decided to bring Darth Maul into Solo because they had the opportunity.
Mhm.
All right. Canon is canon now. So whatever George was musing on the shitter that day doesn't frickin' matter because it can't even work in canon.
Yep.
All right. So it's not Disney's fault. Like,
Yep.
okay, the Rebels was produced under Disney, but Dave Filoni, the prodigal son, who was given a total frickin' free pass
Yep.
to just go and create and try to make money.
Yeah. Well, and what the other side of it that I love for this retroactivity is one of the scripts that George wrote for episode 7 is almost exactly what we got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it was Kira instead of Rey, but like all the things that this crowd that has by and large gone to bat for Lucas. Like these are the same people who are like, how dare they have a Mary Sue? I can't believe, guys, she thought about the Force faster than anyone else. And it's like Anakin as a child destroyed a gigantic battle station.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually hilarious. There is a news report that I've been reading as we were talking, and it's, you know, this is the headline: Fox execs told George Lucas young Anakin would destroy the franchise.
I remember back then, a lot of people said he almost did.
Yeah. A lot of people were
People
done
used
with
to-
Star Wars, and this is the thing. Like, let's remember, Disney didn't do the prequel trilogy. That was all George Lucas. That was 100% George Lucas, the person that not you, okay, the general you, all are praising and wishing would come back, created Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah.
You know?
Like the guy has a creative vision. Whether it's on beat for a boardroom or whatever, you know, he's lived his life in such a way and expressed himself through his art that he's very passionate about what he believes in, whether you like it or not. And somehow it all cobbles together and works. And you see that now with all these kids growing up who cut their teeth on the prequels. And like I'm serious, like, because where I'm tapping into this is through my Lego collecting.
Yep.
Because a lot of the guys that are on YouTube right now who are big Lego influencers are of the age where they're in their early 20s. And they have a very revered outlook towards the prequels. And they're really excited and they're like getting upset because Lego are going back to this 40th anniversary Empire type theme on their releases. And they're like, well, come on, we need more Clone Wars. We need more prequel sets to make us happy.
Yeah.
And things like that. So it's come full circle because it's also going to happen with this sequel trilogy where people are going to be like, oh, that's crap. You know, we're all there and we're all dissatisfied with it. You know, it's to the point now where Disney are talking about making a Lucas cut. Again, speculation. I don't think that there's much to it, to be honest. But there is the idea that, well, they're going to bring George in and it's going to be the Lucas cut and it's going to be, they're going to give Luke a proper death and blah, blah, blah.
The only way number one, it won't be in canon, similar to another fucking reshoot. But the only way that I see that even being humanly thought about is if Kathleen Kennedy does get the boot or leaves. Because I don't think that there's any way in hell that, you know, she's going to want George Lucas around to produce something, you know, especially if it's not in canon. Like, that's the thing. Like, Star Wars right now, they're so focused on the canon, and why are they going to renege on something that's essentially saying we fucked up, mea culpa. There's no way Disney is going to
Yeah.
allow for that. You know?
You can't retcon this.
Yeah, you can't
Mhm.
retcon that.
Like, if you do, you look extremely weak
Yep.
as a company.
So the whole point that we're talking about this is, number one, it's always good chatter. It always brings up a lot of opinions. But, you know, it's just another thing about, you know, as you're looking through your news articles, always take into consideration, you know, revisionist history like this. You know, it'll be interesting to kind of read, to transport. And as the three of us hopefully are still podcasting within 15 years, you know, old man Phil, for sure, he'll have a cane and oxygen mask by that point. You know, it'll be interesting to kind of see how we take a look at things and like that are happening now, and what type of revisionist, like, you know, how the story is going to be retold. Like, can you guys imagine?
Yeah.
Kathleen,
I'm betting.
Kathleen Kennedy saves Star Wars.
Yep. I'm betting in 10 years people are going to love Last Jedi.
People are loving Phantom Menace right now. Like, people.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like, people go to bat for Phantom Menace now, and I remember,
Oh,
you know, like it was the biggest joke. Like, yeah, it was.
I'm sorry, but if you go and there's a Disney Gallery episode where Dave Filoni absolutely destroys anybody who takes a piss shot at Phantom Menace.
Yep.
In the sense that he completely analyzes this thing to that duel of the fates really
Mhm.
being the actual I can't even do it justice. Like, Dave just destroys, and like Bryce Howard and like everybody's just sitting there like just picking themselves up because Dave just destroyed. Like, he put an analysis on that show, on that movie, that absolutely makes it respectable again.
Mhm.
And I'm
Oh,
just
yeah.
gonna say it changes the context that I look at that movie now.
Yeah, I mean, my what criticisms I have for the prequel trilogy are not towards Phantom Menace at this point, other than like people who get mad at, like, I use it as a comparator with the
Mhm.
modern stuff. But
It's just like, you know, the fact that they made a whole movie about Phantom Menace being a joke of a movie, and that's fanboys. You know, it's like, let's not forget, guys. Let's not forget. Just because we're being told now that something was good doesn't mean that it was good back then. And I can equate this to something that's happening in the real world, but I don't want to get there today.
Yeah. No. And Fanboys is actually one of my favorite movies.
Oh, I fucking love that movie.
I thought it was really sweet.
I love that
there's
movie.
a great story in there.
Yeah.
It's
Pitting
just
the
friendship.
the
Yeah.
Trekkers against the Star Wars fans.
Yep.
Oh boy.
It was such a
There's-
good
There
movie.
was some comedic gold in that.
That's something that we should like live review one day. Fanboys.
I mean, we could do that for one of the Christmas episodes.
Exactly. All right, guys. So, you know, man, we're just getting really real today. It's not like as you
Yeah.
were saying, there's not a lot of real news going on.
What?
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's crazy. So, Phil, you had mentioned earlier that you had some news on Star Wars or Lego. Sorry,
Lego. It's not Lego Star Wars. Well, there is a new set that's coming. We knew it was coming. There was a Mandalorian placeholder. That's going to be coming. This wasn't in the news that I was thinking about, but I'm going to say it because it's on topic. And they're bringing out the first episode that we just had from season 2. They're bringing out a set where it's going to be Mando in his Beskar armor, because all previous versions of the Mandalorian minifig have been pre-Beskar, or just a brown kind of crappy armor. And he's going to be on speeder bike, and there's going to be a Tusken Raider, and there's going to be a Baby Yoda, and it's going to ring in, I think, US for $29.99. So that means in Canada it'll be $39.99.
Yep.
So that's a great way to get your hands on a little Baby Yoda and lose it when your dog eats it and poops it out. The next thing that I'm going to bring up is the Millennium Falcon is no longer the biggest Lego set in history.
Jesus Christ.
Lego announced this week that they have a set that has something like, I'm just flying off the top of my head here. I'm not even going to Google it, but it's going to be 9,036 pieces, and it's in the architecture line, and it's going to be the Roman Colosseum. So this is a controversial topic with some fans. It's actually going to be your most attainable big set at clocking in at about 550 USD for that many parts, but the parts are absolutely microscopic. I've built some of these architecture sets. They are fun, but they are challenging. They are so tiny, and you feel like you just spent $100 on a lot of heavy, small Lego.
So
I want to jump in really quickly, just on a quick bit of commentary. For history buffs, it is the unruined Colosseum.
Yes.
Nice.
So it's the full oval with the surrounding
Half
walkways
wall
and
the columns.
It looks great. I don't know where you're gonna put it in your house. Like it's definitely a sizable puppy.
I thought you built it and then you lived in it.
Yeah, it's but you'd be surprised because these are micro scale, so they're a really dense build. They are really packed, and there's a lot of snot technique and whatnot, studs not on top and things like that. There's a lot of texture, a lot of greebling, a lot of it's Lego. Oh, and one last piece of Lego news: Lego Masters 2 has been renewed. The Lego Masters has been renewed for a second season.
That's really cool. I really, really enjoyed that show.
Yeah, I loved having the designers be the judges.
Yeah.
It really made the designers made me pay attention, and I followed a lot of them on Twitter because it's becoming a bigger and bigger part as these models get more and more accurate.
Yeah.
Right.
Man.
And we talked about it with Lauren.
Yeah. 7,541 pieces was the Millennium Falcon. That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
This is being reported as over 9,000.
Yeah, 9,036, I think. And just for scale though, one of the sets that I'd really love to buy, but I can't justify $850 on it, is the Imperial Star Destroyer. If you Google that, that's about 4 feet of it's about I think it's like 6,000 pieces or something like that.
Yeah,
well, just under 5,000. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, and the thing about that is it's mostly plates.
Yeah,
like this thing is absolutely jaw-droppingly gorgeous, in my opinion. But again, where the hell do you put it? Like,
I mean,
honestly,
I watched a build vid for that one, and it's mostly hollow, which I found interesting.
Yeah, like that thing's gonna sag because those Technic pieces that are holding it up look very sparse inside. So I'd be concerned about the warping of the Lego after a while, but I'm sure it's engineered well. So yeah, that's my Lego hot minute.
All right, cool. Thanks, Phil. So one thing that did come up is this kind of made me laugh. And I don't know exactly what to think of this, and that is that the Short Circuit franchise, awesome movie, filmed in Toronto, it's getting a reboot as a Latinx family film. I don't know exactly what that means.
What?
But there we go.
Latinx?
Like Latinos, that's what...
Yeah. That's the current
that's the proper pronoun now for
all right
for
excellent.
Latinos.
I learned something.
I've never used it for myself, but people use it, and good on you.
Yeah,
fair enough.
I've had the specifics behind it explained, and it made sense to me
it
as
makes sense.
not like I'm very white.
Yeah,
so
it makes sense.
Cool.
It makes sense to me. It really does.
Yeah.
It really, really does make sense to me. Especially for a language where you have to be very distinct on male female. So
yes,
or very not distinct, very certain on male female. So, it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows my view on let's please stop rebooting things.
Yeah,
please, just come up with a new show.
Yep.
And
that's the thing, like shorts. Only people above the age of 30 really remember Short Circuit, right? Like, I don't think anyone under the age of 30 would know, unless you have an older sibling or awesome parents. You won't really know or find Short Circuit. So why reboot it? Why use that name? Call it, I don't know, High Voltage or something like that, and it can be whatever you want. You see, this is where the comics gates and video and all these people get a lot of their ammo. a lot of them say, why are we redoing this stuff and having, the visible minorities or females or whatever, and you're just changing history at this point, So this is where they get a lot of their ammo. It's much easier to just create a new concept, name it whatever the hell you want, and it can be its own thing. Like, there's no point in calling this Short Circuit if it's being changed so much. Just let it live.
Isn't there
let live.
controversy about Short Circuit anyway? Because they had a guy who was like Indian-esque,
Yeah.
but it was a white guy
Yeah.
that they had, and it's just like I know that I've seen controversy about that where they're like, it's not cool.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know what you're mining at that point. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's like, ooh, it's kind of tainted as far as its portrayal of Indian actors.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And you a lot of people like my age, your age, kind of like will make fun of that accent because of just the way that he used to say Johnny Five, So like, I don't know, it's just you're really digging at this point, and again, it's just you're taking something beloved to a certain age group, a certain demographic, and kind of changing things. It's kind of like, I remember reading a while ago that they wanted to reboot Porky's.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh my god!
What?
Wow.
Yeah.
Porky's was a thing.
Yeah, it was a thing.
That was when you bought
Is that the Fat Camp one?
When you bought Starlog magazine, all right, Porky's would pull out full page ads of women's legs and guys staring, like the eyeballs staring in the shower. It was all about a peep show.
Yeah.
I don't know that I actually successfully watched it as a kid.
Bill,
but I just remember the hype.
I did. I watched it when I was 8 years old.
Oh my god. Have you talked to your therapist about this?
I have a lot of things to unpack with my therapist about some of the stuff I watched when I was younger. You'd be shocked. Like, my parents had zero filter on what I watched. In fact, my dad would encourage me to watch some stuff with him. It was very awkward, very weird.
Yeah, I remember getting a big charge out of Stripes because it had boobies in it.
Stripes. That's a fucking great movie, too. And that's the thing. Like, are they going to reboot that? Like, just leave these stuff alone. There's no point in rebooting any of this stuff. Like,
that was a Bill Murray masterclass, that movie.
Yep. John Candy, Bill Murray.
John Candy's first appearance in film.
Yep.
As Ox.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Such a funny movie. Had
Eugene Levy.
Yep. Yep.
Like, it was all SCTV at the time, remember?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I feel old.
Well,
but that was a great show. I loved it. And Demi Moore, wasn't Demi Moore in it?
I don't remember. And I recently, quote unquote, rewatched it like 5-6 years ago. I gotta revisit that one again. Such a good movie.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Police Academy in the Army, though.
Yeah.
In fact, that's exactly what it is.
Sean Young. I'm thinking Sean Young. She was in Harold Ramis, Bill Murray, John Candy. Oh, that was a great show. Good times.
Yes, it really was. All right.
Stop getting to the bottom of the barrel, everybody. Come on. Come up with some new stuff. Johnny Five is not alive.
Chris Pratt joins the cast of Thor: Love and Thunder. Filming begins in Australia in January. I wonder how many people are going to try to cancel Chris Pratt.
Yeah.
Let the man do his own political thing.
Yeah.
We just got to.
This is where, sometimes you just have to separate the politics from the person. I know that sometimes you can't.
He's allowed to have his own view.
But yeah.
Well, he is. I mean, I think that most people's biggest offense was people were like, hey, Chris Pratt's a member of this group that's pretty anti-LGBT. And a bunch of people came to his defense, and people were like, where was that defense for everyone else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, I think, a much bigger issue to a lot of people. Was like, wait a minute.
That's fair. I'm not saying that isn't a problem.
Hey,
I didn't dig into it. I avoided that one.
When are we going to talk about J.K. Rowling?
I don't want to.
That was a joke.
Yeah.
I still haven't watched Harry Potter.
I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole.
I mean, that's another one. People are defending J.K. Rowling, and it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Space Force. Netflix has renewed this for season
Season 2.
What?
Yeah,
They didn't cancel it?
I know, right?
Well, no, they'll cancel for season 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whenever the crew gets a raise, that's when they'll cancel it.
Yeah. And Netflix's default contract says that everyone gets a raise for season 3.
Yep.
Or a bonus.
Or a bonus, yeah.
That's why, yeah, someone, I think it was Wired, did a wonderful article on it.
Yep, it was Wired. And I'm trying to get the author of that article on this show so that we can discuss that.
Ooh.
Chris Nolan doesn't think not being able to hear his movie's dialogue is a big deal. That's a funny one too.
So I actually, I've been doing a little bit of reading on film theory and film criticism recently, and this actually fits into a larger thing in like film theory from like an academic standpoint, and that is that like dialogue is largely considered to be unimportant compared to the rest of the movie, which is bananas.
What?
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Look, if you are educated in film and film theory, that's your opinion. But for us people who are just want to be entertained, I want to be able to hear what's going on. I don't care about the nuances and this and that about a movie, So I get both point of views, but there's one thing that overshadows any point of view when it comes to a movie, and that's the money.
Mm-hmm. Well, didn't George Lucas want to film the prequels without actually... It was all going to be music?
He
didn't want the dialogue. He didn't want the dialogue.
So
he felt that the audience could follow the story.
He wanted to do Fantasia.
Yeah, it wasn't so much the dialogue; it was he wanted it all to be CGI. He didn't want any actors. Ron Howard, funny enough, has a funny story about the first day on set when they were filming American Graffiti. He introduces himself to George Lucas, and George Lucas flat out says, "Day one of filming, I don't like working with actors." Boom. So it's he's never really, and that's why they really dug deep on the CGI with the prequel trilogies, which to its detriment made it look so fake, especially now that if you were to revisit those movies, man, someone should remake them in the sense of updating some of that CGI, because it's all green screen or blue screen or whatever. It's all CGI, so you can actually update it to make it look better. And why did I just say that? We're gonna get that, aren't we?
Yep.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah, Star Wars, George Lucas once said, dialogue isn't important.
I mean, sure. And again, this is not me defending the academic point. It's just being like, yeah, the Academy says that, and I think it's. I mean, I'm a writer. I think that's stupid, but it's just the Academy is a mixed bag.
I'll relate it back to a point. I don't know if I told this on the show or not. Boris will know, or Tyler will know. I met Robin Williams once in a very informal happenstance thing. I met him at the Silver Snail, and there was nobody around. It was just me and Robin, and we were talking about anime. And he was really into Ghost in the Shell, and so am I. And his analysis of Ghost in the Shell left me speechless.
Yeah.
Because the way he views it and the way I view it are completely boys to men. Like, I'm just like, I like guns and boobs and the existential discussion about your soul. And he's just like the Machiavellian breakdown and architecture of blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what the actual hell? I'm an idiot. I'm a total fucking idiot.
Robin Williams is one of those people I love watching actual interviews with when he's like genuinely down to talk, because he's brilliant. Marilyn Manson, too, is surprisingly like, oh, well, actually, if we talk about the riff here, it was influenced by, and you're like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah. It was a very enlightening 20 minutes of my life. Is watching him switch into stand-up comedian mode and watching him be real Robin Williams when we're talking about cycling, when we're talking about our life passions, and that I knew about, that I'm going through the encyclopedia of my mind. Like, how many things have I read about Robin Williams? And he was friends with Lance Armstrong at the time and wasn't disgraced. And like, what are we going to talk about? Because I want to constantly remember this.
Yeah.
So is interesting.
It just reminds me of that scene of Wayne's World when they meet Alice Cooper. When they're just in awe, like how smart this guy actually is. It's like, you always have to remember that with a lot of celebrities, is that especially someone like Robin Williams, like a comedian, and we talked about this with Fearless Fred, and it's like, it's a character. You're portraying a character when you're doing something like that, no matter what. Even to a certain extent, like the Boris, Phil, and Tyler that you guys hear on this show. There's certain things that, there's certain differences from the real Boris, Phil, and Tyler.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, me to 60, with some of the things that I say and the way that I act and whatnot. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So one last thing.
We all have our little characters.
Yep. One last thing before we talk about PlayStation 5. And that is Twitch admits it handled DMCA takedowns poorly. Says better tools are on the way. So this is just, so Twitch being Twitch at this point, they know they fucked up on both sides. They knew that they should have handled copyright and copyright infringements better, but they also knew that they should have protected their customers more. So, they're kind of backpedaling a little bit and saying mea culpa, and they have acknowledged that it's fault in the way that it handled the DMCA controversy that put streamers at risk. But at the same time, the company says that streamers aren't out of the woods just yet, and they strongly recommend they not play licensed music during streams as negotiations continue between Twitch and everyone in the world. So, yeah. So this is basically Twitch is saying, trying to still be the middleman, trying to not lose customers, while also not trying to be sued.
Yeah, and water's wet.
Yep.
We should do a DMCA IP episode at some point.
Oh, that's
sorry. A fly just walked over my camera lens.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's the DMCA people.
Yeah, that dawned on me.
Yeah,
he's all about this camera. Oh my god. Yeah, we should do a deeper thing on because DMCA is like a whole. It's like a big topic, and we should talk to a lawyer to get some. We should get a lawyer on who's willing to talk just broadly about it.
Yeah, for sure. That's in my notes. Is that would be an awesome episode, because a lot, even streamers have been hit hard, but DJs.
Oh, it's
also.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
lot of even podcasts.
Yep.
That's why. I said it before and I'll say it again. Mostly all original music on this podcast for that very reason. We got, the only times we never got hit with DMCA, but we get hit with content, aka some butthurt person is tattling on us, and the episode gets taken down, and then I complain, and it gets put back up minutes later.
Yeah, then they review it and they go, "Oh, they're a bunch of nerds talking about nerd stuff."
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Do you guys have anything else to talk about before we jump into our experiences with the PlayStation 5?
I think it's PS5 time.
All right, so Tyler, what was your experience with the PlayStation 5? You talked a little bit about how you were lucky enough to get your hands on one, almost two.
Yep.
Floor is yours.
So I got in late after a day of work. I didn't get mine until Friday. I got in like 8 p.m. and my partner was out for the overnight. So I had the place to myself, and I plugged it in, got it doing the day one patching because it's gotta. Took the dog for a walk, and I came in, and it was, I don't know what the PS5 has done, whether they've done the sound design different or that HDMI is just that much better. But my dog, who like understands like vaguely video game time means we're going to sit on the couch together and hang out, but he was like paying attention to the television, and he was like having a good time. And I have video of him like watching me play Miles Morales and reacting to stuff on the screen.
That's hilarious.
So they've got something else going on there. But yeah, there's a comic I think of from time to time, which is an old penny arcade, entitled "A Trick of Retrospective," and it was about like a Mega Man game, I think. but it's about that capacity for certain things to take you back to that point when you were like a 10-year-old again. And you know, you what was in this box or what was in this game, it would just solve all your problems. Like, just everything would be better for a little bit. And I cracked into Miles Morales, and it was just like, for about 2 hours, all of the problems were gone.
Yep, I concur.
It's a nice feeling. Now, I don't have a PS5, but I do have a PS4 Pro. And I made the executive decision Friday night to download said Miles Morales for the PS4 Pro, given that it upgrades free on the PS5. And so I purchased a digital copy, and I do have to say it was rather comforting.
Yeah,
sliding into that the intro gameplay and whole handshake to welcome back to Spider-Man was just so well done. Even better than the original game.
Yeah.
I got it. Like, they really went on point with the matriculation of getting the player into the environment, getting the player into the character, and getting the player engaged in the story. It was just all really well done.
I want to nerd out about 2 technical specifics about the PS5 in that game. And one of them, I actually a question for you, Phil, having played on the PS4. And this is delving deep, but so one of the things that we've heard a lot about is the haptic response on the PS5 controller. So in that opening, mild spoilers, Miles rides a subway at one point. What happened to your controller during that?
I will mention that this game, more than any other game that I've seen, uses the rumble feature on the PS4 controller way more than I think it's good for. So,
okay. So I'm wondering if that's
hitting all the time. It seems like.
Okay, so yeah. So I think that's a poor porting, because on the PS5, I was back on the Manhattan subway line. Like, I knew which line it was. I've been to New York quite a few times, and I love that city. It's one of my favorite cities on the planet. And I knew that train, and it was like the exact like and it's like a mild to thing. So the haptic was there, and I noticed it immediately, and that was like a great kind of tech demo they had. I'm interested what they do in future things with it, because that was neat.
As far as the reaction that I've seen on the internet about it is generally that I've seen. Now, this is just opinion, right? Like, this is just people spouting off on YouTube or on a games channel or whatnot that I just pay attention to. And they're kind of critical of it. They said that it's being overused. It's almost like a gimmick in this game. They think that there's a better use case for being a little more subtle with it. And they're just, because they felt it became a distraction, how much the controller was leveraging the haptic.
Oh yeah, I mean, how much of that is also like, it's the new thing, you should really do it.
Yeah, I think there's a line that the developers are definitely like a way that they're going to be able to sharpen the experience and get on point with it, where they refine it and they go, you know, we found that this was really a nice feature, whereas this is overused.
Yeah,
it reminded me of an early. Oh yeah,
demo units are gonna play one of 2 games. It's gonna play Miles Morales or Astro Playroom. So you want to oversell the features of that controller on whatever the stores are gonna put as their demo unit game.
That's a good point.
Yeah, no, it's valid.
Because Astro Playroom, as stupid and whatever, because it downloaded instantly, as I was doing other stuff. Yeah. What's it called? I was fooling around with it, and like, it was really cool. Like, you know, that was the first time that you had that haptic feedback. You know, to use the triggers, you didn't have to go all the way. You felt what was actually happening to your character. There was one early instance where you're kind of walking through water and a waterfall, and just the way that that felt, you know, was really, really cool. So I can see, you know, not only is this a demo for end users and consumers like us, it gives developers ideas and game designers ideas of what they can actually do moving forward with that controller. So while overused, maybe, why wouldn't you overuse it for your launch title?
Yeah, that's definitely in
Yeah.
there. It's a very valid point. The question that I have about it is that is this going to be a feature that only Sony developers are basically mandated in leveraging, or is it going to be a feature that other game developers, AAA game developers, are going to be able to actually try to engage in, much like the touchpad, right? The
Yep.
touchpad for a lot of companies is just a glorified X button. It's a home button. All right. But for like Sony games, even in Miles Morales, you got to swipe left and then it brings up your app and you can quickly track things through that. And, like it's again, Sony say, no, you have to do a feature other than press in on it. Like we want to use the touch controls. We want to use this. So my hope is that if this, this is one of those things that tilts the scale in favor of Sony in the next gen market, is this controller. I hope that companies like Cyberpunk 2077, like CD Projekt Red and some of these other developers that maybe aren't just an exclusive in-house development cycle start to use it.
Yep. I agree. It very much felt like some of the early Wii games that way to me. But when everyone was like, "How do we use this?" Because some of those early Wii games aged phenomenally, and some aged very poorly.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing, which I only like kind of noticed, and you notice a lot more when people start like pointing it out to you, but the sheer capacity for the game to do graphical things like. In some of the suits you have, there's some reflectivity to it, and you can actually see like the world reflected off of Miles's suit being done as you go. And I'm not a tech person. My understanding is that is in part caused by the ray tracing.
Yeah, it's real-time shadow and light reference.
Yeah, and I thought that was like, again, it felt very much like, oh cool, we're doing a tech demo here. It looks really cool. It looks really pretty. I'm very interested to see what it goes in some of these other ones, especially with a couple of these more out there new IPs that we're seeing in the first year. I'm thinking your Returnal and your Deathloop, which both of those have my attention.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what those two do with some of this new tech, because those look like very interesting new IPs.
Yeah, Deathloop for sure has my attention. Though every early game seems to be some form of loop type game, which is interesting. Anyways, that's beside the point. One thing that I did notice right away, and it was actually brought to my attention from Jim Zub on his Facebook, and that's the depth perception of the New York skyline in Spider-Man.
Oh my god,
it's insane. I don't even think I can see that far, like, in real life.
IRL.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, 100%.
I gotta say, because I saw him tweet that, and I took a look at my game, and the draw depth is pretty high on the regular PS4 Pro.
Yeah.
Like, it was equally, like, I was doing side by side, and I'm like, it's not that different. It's impressive, like, on both games. It's the way that the game's made. That's for sure.
Yeah.
The sleeper pick that I'm looking forward to on the PS5 when I finally get it next year will be there's a cat game that absolutely looks phenomenal.
That cat game. Oh yeah.
Like, I'm all about that. I don't know, it just looks like it's going to be a lot more fun than people think.
Yeah.
Oh no, there's a lot of games coming out in 2021 for this that I'm like, well, I think I might want to cancel some of these writing projects and just accept that my career is taking a hit.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Have you loaded up any PS4 games on your console, Tyler?
I have not yet.
All right.
I had too much fun with Miles Morales, and then I tried Valhalla. And for that game, that one of the shining moments for that game was the sensitivity of the R2 and L2 triggers and how they use that in game, because very quickly on the fly, once you get used to it, you're able to adjust how far you're throwing with just like a quick flick.
Yep.
And you're throwing a lot of torches in that game to burn stuff.
Yeah.
So like being able to do that on the run, it meant that it took me a little bit to get used to it because it's different. But by the time I got into like my first like, oh yeah, get in there and burn some houses down, I felt like a Viking.
Nice.
Awesome.
Oh, because it was like,
Yeah, so I loaded up Metal Gear Solid 5, and I have to say that, you know, it runs so fast because that game is a hog.
Yeah.
You know, and I had it locally. Like I was never running off a CD, but even local install, that game was a hog. The loading times were greatly improved on PS5. So that's one thing I really got to give it, you know, kudos to Sony for. One thing that, you know, number one, the sheer size of the box. I would have hated to be a delivery person, you know, on Thursday and into this weekend delivering those PS5s. Like, it is the biggest box I have ever seen in my life. And then you have
it also has a it has the plastic handle that everyone was reporting snaps.
Yeah. So that scares me. But then
Where is this handle?
It's on the top, so you can like carry it like a briefcase. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Do not do it.
The system is heavy on top of it all.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, you know what, I gotta say, it's really well packaged. Like, if that thing can get rattled, that thing can be dropped probably, and it'll be fine. But, you know, obviously you wouldn't want that to happen. But it's really well secured. It does use the new HDMI, so that's a thing.
The
sheer
which my TV has, which was like, oh,
nice.
Mwah.
Yeah. The sheer size of it. How do you have it? Standing up or laying down? Sideways?
Lying down. I have a compact little like TV stand with one of those like bars at the back that then the TV is like hanging from the stand. And it is sideways in the bottom shelf, and it's like if you look down, just as a result, it's the focal point.
Yeah.
And I've kind of leaned into that. It's like I have my little tiny PS1 next to it.
Yeah.
I have my little tiny Steam box, because that's actually an amazing piece of tech that didn't get enough love.
Yeah. So I have mine standing up, and it's about 3/4 of the size of my TV.
Yeah.
It's crazy how big it is. It is absolutely crazy how big it is. One thing that I did was I cleaned out the back of where the PS5 was going, because I don't know how hot it's gonna get. That's one thing that I'm worried about. So hopefully the back of yours isn't like covered.
Oh, there's like nothing there. I ran some initial tests because I am also worried about that. And as you may have heard during the podcast, listeners, I have a dog. And the result is that there's a lot of fur, so everything it's blown out regularly. And it's doing a lot better than my PS4 did.
Same. It doesn't sound like a jet engine, you know?
Yep.
So...
I mean, I think that's part of that design, actually, is I'm betting part of that derpy design is acoustic management and heat management.
Yep. That's what I'm thinking.
Oh, yeah. On the teardowns, it's all heat sink and all airflow.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Now, I did have one scare yesterday. So there's two major problems being reported with the PS5, and that is if you leave Spider-Man Remastered on and you turn the system off, it fucks up the storage, and as it tries to reboot and does its diagnostics, it crashes and c'est la vie. The other issue that's being reported is on
wait. What do you mean it crashes in C'est la vie?
C'est la vie, as in it gets bricked.
Oh, it's bricked.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted for the audience.
Don't do that, people.
So if you're playing Spider-Man Remastered on PS5, turn the game off before you shut down or put your PS5 in sleep mode. Be careful. The other issue is the queue to download issue, which I don't know what happens, but essentially just remove stuff, put stuff back on your list. I haven't seen either issue, But yesterday, when I was playing Spider-Man Remastered, I got to a certain scene, and PS5 just turned off. Turned it back on. It did the cycling, the checking hard drive, and my heart's beating like a mofo. I'm sweating at this point, and luckily everything is good. But who knows what happened? But yeah, I just can't wait for these things to be updated. But yeah, overall, go ahead, Tyler.
There is a third issue that's being reported that I saw earlier today.
All right.
And the third issue is that a lot of games, when you try to download them, and it's for digital-only games, they'll just sit in download hell, and they'll get frozen.
Yeah, that's the queue to download.
Oh, that's what you mean. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I've seen another one, too, with the new Call of Duty game, Cold War. Apparently, it downloads the PS4 version, and you can't access the PS5 version.
Yes.
And you have to reinitialize your entire console, and then reload your profile back onto it, and then the PS5 version will and re-download the game, and then the PS5 version will run. But you have to.
That's a licensing issue there. The other thing you can do is revoke all your licenses. And redo your licenses on your profile.
Okay.
Anyways, where was I going to go with that? Yeah, overall things are running fairly well. One thing that you have to be cautious about is if there is a game that you own that's on PS4 and it doesn't show up on your list to download, you might have to actually select that it is a PS4 game. But the one thing is that the menu is really neat, but it's kind of weird because right now you don't have option of different themes, because it's all kind of there. Like your store is just embedded into the UI now. PS Now is embedded into the UI. PS Plus is embedded into the UI. You still can't create folders. So, a lot of the day one stuff that you saw with PS4 is there right now on PS5. In regards to pressing the PlayStation button, I'm like, how the fuck do I turn this thing off? It took me like a couple minutes to realize that, you have to get to that menu, and then that's the only place that you can see the power on, off, and whatnot.
Yeah. It also has the same as PS4, where if you just leave it, it'll just go into low power.
Yes. Yeah.
Just don't do it while playing Spider-Man.
Yes. Close Spider-Man Remastered as any time that you're done with it.
Otherwise, you got a Finny hood. You got a Finny brick.
Yep, exactly. Outside of that, the system is running great. I think that, one major complaint that I have, and it's not to the system itself, it's to the release. It's that the fact that there really aren't a lot of release titles. So thank God this is the first time I'm going to admit it, and thank God the PlayStation 5 is backwards compatible with PS4 at the very least.
Yes. If it wasn't compatible, it'd probably still sell. This year is so weird.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for the 12th, because as of recording, Cyberpunk hasn't been delayed again yet. Despite some rumors, but I'm really interested to see what that does on that hardware.
Yep, cross your fingers, boys and girls. The Cyberpunk is coming.
Let's hope so.
No, look, I just gotta watch that stock just
pull a Square Enix.
Yeah.
All right, Tyler. Anything else to wrap up the discussion?
It's just I think that we're starting to see people reporting this, but it looks like Sony has gotten Xbox real good again. Like, it's looking at those production numbers, looking at those sales numbers, I'm interested to see what Microsoft does next, because I think that unless their strategy is just it's a PC for your television, and also we're just gonna like if they had just like free, like, oh, your saves are all on both your PC and your Xbox, whatever, who gives a shit, and they just did it that way, that's a really good outflanking maneuver. But if they decide to get into the mud versus Sony, I'm interested to see what happens.
Yep. So here's my take on kind of the Xbox Microsoft strategy. Phil, I want your opinion after this. And that is, I saw many articles referencing to the fact that there was a lot of discussion that they were going to cancel the Xbox project. So I think that Microsoft as a company is really focusing on the services, Game Pass, making it compatible among where anything that you can connect it to, including your fridge and whatever. So I think that overall that seems to be the strategy that Microsoft is doing and using moving forward, with less emphasis on the actual consoles themselves. So it will be interesting to kind of see if this is maybe possibly the last console that they have. But they seem to be all in with services.
Yeah, that's basically my Xbox experience on, the now last generation. It seems to be where they're targeting. They want my $16 a month. I'm happy to fork it over just in terms of reducing video game expense.
Yeah.
So that is a bonus. But I see that as a strategy, but they really, right now, in my opinion, the dangerous part that Microsoft has performed now is releasing that Xbox Series S, because it hampers the developers, it confuses the marketplace, and it's economically an eyesore because it's cheap, but to upgrade it to be a usable thing, it's not cheap. And then you may as well have bought an X, and I think you're going to have buyer remorse all over the place. You're going to have confusion, and you're going to have developers abandoning it as far as,
support.
It's going to be too difficult, right? Like, you're just going to have Bethesda and 343 and, the companies that are developing for Gears and whatnot basically committed to this thing, but that's always going to be a hindrance on development.
I'm really nervous about the buyer's remorse, and I'm even more nervous about the developers and third-party devs wanting to support that console, because I have this fear that in 12 to 18 months we're going to see a headline that reads, Xbox Series S canceled.
Yeah, like, everything about it is annoying to me. The fact that they reused the vernacular that they used on the Xbox One with the X and the S, and then to put a series in there, it reeks of just dumb frickin' decisions.
What's worse is that if you log on to Amazon, if you log on to Best Buy, if you log on to Walmart, you know what seems to be selling out a lot fast right now?
The old X version.
Xbox One S. The amount of people buying the One S thinking that it's a Series S. Guys, come on.
It happened with the X.
Yep.
People were getting the X showing up on Tuesday. Like, Microsoft have really bottled it here. Like, why couldn't you call it something else? The poopy bum drawers device.
Anything.
I don't care.
Yep.
Anything but reusing that. It's just hell for parents. It's hell for kids. It's no fun to have to. It's like Sony with their product numbers. Oh, you should try out our XDR-32701-3ZX1-3A.
Yep.
That's the model you're after for. Like, come on.
Yep.
It's not customer friendly, but that's angry Phil for you.
Alrighty, guys. I think we've really gone in deep about what we like, what we don't like, what we expect. We're going to be talking about this over the next few weeks, I'm sure, as we get more games and more time with the systems. But those are our initial reactions. Thanks, Tyler, for that. And Phil, I hope you can join us sometime soon in this world of PlayStation 5.
Targeting January. I got a birthday coming up.
Yep, you do.
It's going to have a nice big white PS5 in there.
Alrighty. So for anyone who wants to send us feedback, say hi, tell me to fuck off. Phil, can you tell us how they can do that?
Wow, what a lead-in. We're going to go deep on this one. Our website is www.itscanonpodcast.com. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at It's Canon Podcast. You can email us at show@itscanonpodcast.com. That's the best way to get to Boris. And you can subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, Podbean, Amazon, really anywhere you find your podcast, you're going to find us. And if we're not there, let us know, and we will get there. If you like what you hear so far, make sure to basically subscribe and get notified whenever we have one of these things come out. And it'd be really kind of you to leave a rate and review. You know, we like that.
Thank you,
We like
everyone
that.
who
It helps us.
Yes, thank you to everyone who has left a review and a rating. We are still 5 stars. Thank you to everyone who listens. Thank you for everyone who puts up with our ramblings of geeks. But just a quick reminder this week, you have today's news episode. You have Mando Monday as we review Season 2, Episode 3, Chapter 11. And then no featured episode on Wednesday. But on Thursday, I'm back with Matt as we chat about all things NXT. That leads us into Thanksgiving week, where we have a full rotation of shows for you. So thank you, everyone. He's Phil. He's Tyler. I'm Boris. And this is the It's Canon Podcast, the podcast where we chat about all things, everything. And the best part of it all is that it's all in canon. Goodbye.